Well, good afternoon. Happy Friday, July 18th. Mark Milam here, your mortgage professional. Not the news we needed this week in terms of inflation. We saw the Consumer Price Index, the most widely recognized measure of inflation, tick up from 2.3% last month up to 2.7% this month. I'll flip the screen around and show you the chart. So you can see this is where we came in, 2.7%. We actually 2.4 last, 2.3 the month before, 2.4 the month before. So this resurgence in inflation, some say coming as a result of the tariffs, perhaps tariff inflation starting to slip through to the cost of goods. Others say, hey, this is still embedded in really heavily weighted sectors like shelter inflation, for instance. We also saw a spike in energy prices as it pertains to the cost of electricity. This is kind of something worth watching here, what's happening with electricity. Going back all the way to the 80s, we can see the cost of electricity spiking here coming through the pandemic, but it has continued to go up, up, and up. Some of this is around infrastructure reinforcement or upgrade. But really, if you take a look at it, the inflation month over month with electricity went up over 3%. So that was kind of fascinating. Adding to the list of fascinating, Fed Governor Christopher Waller, who is a voting member of the Fed, made the strongest call yet for a rate cut in July. The Fed does meet this month on Wednesday, July the 30th. And here's the actual speech that Fed Governor Christopher Waller gave on July 17th yesterday. And he said, first, tariffs are one-off increases and don't cause inflation beyond a temporary surge. That's a little different than what we've been hearing from Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, who is certainly under the looking glass. Also, he says the data implies that the policy rate should be neutral and estimates that to be at 3%. The Fed funds rate currently is at 4.5%. So you're talking about a 1.5 percentage point cut if Waller was in charge, or that's assuming that that's what he would support gradually in steps. And if you scroll down to the speech, he does say a couple of things here that I tend to agree with. He says private payroll employment grew by just 74,000 on the last non-farm payroll report. That's a much smaller gain than in previous months. He says he focuses on private sector employment because it's the lion's share of employment, and also because it's a better guide to cyclical movement of employment versus counting public or government employees. As he used to tell his students, Waller said, the Federal Reserve's job should be to maximize private sector employment, not government employment. So we tend to agree with those takes. Listen, the public employment, government employment, that can very easily be manipulated by whatever administration is in the office. So we really shouldn't be looking at that as a measure of labor strength. We should be looking at private sector employment. And if you look at that for the last non-farm payroll report, Waller's 100% correct. We did not see a very robust number, in fact, showing some concerns in the private sector. Shifting back to a survey here in the Poly markets asked, will the next Fed chairman be Christopher Waller? And you can see from yesterday to today, his chances have tripled according to the betting market, the Poly market. If we go out to July 30th and take a look at the futures traders for that next meeting, boy, we're a 95% chance we are not going to see any change to the Fed funds rate, even though Christopher Waller is calling for that on his side. And last but not least, NAR Chief Economist Lawrence Yun, let me get this out of the way. NAR Chief Economist Lawrence Yun has downgraded his forecast for sales for the remainder of 2025. Back in November of 2024, this chief economist for the National Association of Realtors said we see about a 9% growth in home sales in 2025. That was revised to a 6% growth in home sales back in March, now being revised again to a 3% growth in home sales, which is still kind of interesting because year over year, as compared to 2024, existing home sales are down about 1%. New home sales are down about 6.7%. So a lot of work to be done if we're going to hit the 3% increase that the NAR chief economist is calling for now in the month of July for the remainder of 2025. Also forecasting that if we can get mortgage rates down to 6%, we should see a 14% increase in home sales next year. That's a big if, though. Not a lot of evidence on the horizon that we would see mortgage interest rates at 6% with no points by the end of the year, but we can always hope. If I can be of any service to you over the weekend, don't hesitate to reach out, mark.milam@highlandmtg.com.